Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for your patience while we got sorted out our technical difficulties. Welcome to Technological Protection Measures in Bill C-32. What is their impact on access to knowledge? It's my pleasure to introduce our speaker today. My name is John Sadler. I'm the Director of the Law Library, and this session is sponsored by Western Libraries. Our speaker today is Dr. Thomas Margoni, and he is a postdoctoral fellow at the Faculty of Law here at the University of Western Ontario. He's also a part-time assistant professor of computer science, where he teaches law in computer science and intellectual property. Dr. Margoni is a non-resident fellow at the Nexa Center for Internet and Society at the University of Turin in Italy, where he is co-directing the intellectual property law clinic. He's been active in the field of law and new technologies for many years, writing and teaching in different countries. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Margoni.
Sorry for being so late, but usually when I talk I go very long, so probably by 5 p.m. we are still here, but I try to make it very, very, very interesting, or at least short. My idea was to give you a very general but comprehensive overview of what technological protection measures are and how they are implemented in Bill C-32. Now, I assume that everybody knows what Bill C-32 is. Basically is an attempt to reform copyright law in Canada. We have had many attempts in the past year. We have had Bill C-60, Bill C-61, and now we have Bill C-32. We will analyze it under, divide it in 4 ways. So we will basically see what the bill is, what it says, why it says that, if it could have said something different, and what alternatives we have. The reason why I subdivided it this way is because many times the rhetoric that you hear right now is we need to update our copyright law. We need to fulfill our international obligations. This is true. Canada has international obligations since a lot of years. They have ratified the WIPO treaties, but they have not implemented them yet. Bill C-32 is meant to fill this gap. However, between doing it and the many different ways of doing it, there is a huge difference. So we will see that, especially in point 2 and 3. And finally, in point 4, we'll see some alternatives, usually contractually based. So we will see how Creative Commons licenses and free open source software licenses can partially fix the problem created by TPM, if problems are, and how they deal contractually with TPMs. So starting with what Bill C-32 said, there are 4 key concepts that I want to analyze. Technological protection measures, right management information, digital right management, and trusted computing. The first 2 are in red because they are defined by the Act. So we have legal and RMI. We don't have legal definition of DRM and TC, at least not in Canadian copyright law or Canadian proposed copyright law. However, in order to understand why TPM are so important, why the lobbying activity of many different forces has been so strong, in order to understand the full picture, we have to see what DRM and TC are as well. TPM, I'm reporting the bill definition, are any effective technology, device, or component that in the ordinary course of its operation either controls access to a work or restrict the doing of any act referred to in section 3, 15, 18, 19, which basically means all the rights that copyright legislation grants to author. This is a very important distinction because in this definition we see that Canadian legislator creates 2 types of TPMs, access control and copy control. This is very important. We will see that in more in depth later, but this is a first fundamental aspect to remember. This is the definition of TPM. Now, what is the prohibited behavior when we deal with TPM? To circumvent access control TPMs. So the first type, type A. even if the work subject to TPM is legally required. This is pretty obvious. So we will see that the difference between access control and copy control TPMs is fundamental, also because the type of prohibited actions is different. In case of access control, the very same act of circumventing them is prohibited. So is circumvention of copy control TPM legitimate? Yes, probably yes. Under a legal point of view, at least, it makes sense. A plain interpretation of the rule would say yes. However, under a technical point of view, this makes basically no sense, because if you don't have access to a digital work, you probably cannot copy it. So, legally speaking, there is a difference between type A, so access control, and type B, so copy control. Under a technical point of view, this difference might be, not necessarily, but might be completely meaningless. What we mean by circumvention, though, because this is as important as the definition of TPM. So in the case of access control TPMs, technological protection measures, circumvention means to descramble a scrambled word, to decrypt an encrypted word, or to otherwise avoid, bypass, remove, deactivate, or infer the technological protection measures unless you are authorized to do so. Access control. In the case of copy control, the circumvention definition is avoid, bypass, remove, deactivate, or infer the technological protection measure. Now, why it is important to understand the difference of the meaning of circumventing, access control, and copy control. We just saw that copy control circumvention is not sanctioned. Because there is another set of actions that are prohibited, both for copy control and for access control, TPMs. And what is prohibited is the distribution, marketing, manufacture, importation, offer for sale or rental of devices, technologies, components such as software that can be used to circumvent TPMs. In this case, no distinction between access or copy control. And what is prohibited is a set of action that is incredibly wide. Distribution, marketing, manufacture, importation, offer for sale or rental. It means that you can do anything. If you have devices, so software, screwdrivers, any kind of device that allows the circumvention of every type of TPM, the prohibited actions are distribution, marketing, manufacture, importation, offer for sale, or rental. If, for any chance, you wrote a piece of software whose purpose is that to circumvent a TPM and they stop you at the airport, they put you in jail because you cannot import it. It's oversimplifying, but basically the idea is this one. So in the case of devices, all these actions are prohibited. Not the act of circumventing them, but the dealing with the tools that you need to circumvent them. It's a very slight but meaningful distinction. In the case of type A TPMs, the very same act of circumventing them, circumvent access control, is sanctioned. Okay? I understand it's a bit technical. It's very important to understand the distinction. We will see later on why this is so important. So don't be afraid if you have no idea of what I said so far. Usually it happens. At the end of the talk, probably things are not getting any better, but at least we are at the end. This, what we have analyzed now, is technological protection measures. Another definition that we have in Bill C-32, a completely different one, is RMI, Right Management Information. By right management information, the definition is information that is attached to a copy of a work and that identifies or permits the identification of the work or its author or concerns the term or condition of the work's use. So basically, it's a description of the work or a description of what you can do with the work. and it is attached to the work. Remember that? Remember what is prohibited. Basically, the removal of this information. If you remove this information, then you're committing something that Bill C-32 says you cannot. MP3 songs, why you can read the title on your MP3 reader? Because you have RMI information. The title is this type of information. RMI is meant to be more than that, so not only the description of the work, but also the description of what we can do with the work. But basically it's this type of information. So second concept. First TPM, second RMI. Third, DRM. We said that the first two are defined by the Act, the second two are not. DRM, so I'm taking the Wikipedia definition, is as good as any other. There is no legal definition of what DRM are. DRM are a phenomena. It's something that is happening, is a word common in many different areas. This is an acceptable definition. Digital RAM management is a term for access copy control technologies that can be used by hardware manufacturers, publishers, copyright holders, and individuals to limit the usage of digital content devices. So basically what we can understand is that DRM is a big level that embraces TPM and RMIs. Then we have the fourth one, which is as well is not defined by the Copyright Act, by Bill C-32, trusted computing. Trusted computing, the computer will consistently behave in expected ways, and those behaviors will be enforced by hardware and software. The main functionality of TC is to allow someone else to verify that only authorized code runs on a system. So far, you have your computer, you have an operating system, you can run third-party software without any problem, right? You have the ability to run arbitrary software on your system. With trusted computing, you don't have this ability anymore, because only authorized, trusted software can run on your system. This is a technology. It's not good or bad just for the technology. The usage that we do of this technology might be good or bad. But we will see that later on. So, so far we have seen four concepts, TPM, RMI, DRM, and TC. And the reason why I'm stressing this fourfold partition is because they create only one form of skill. That is basically the control of information. So imagine that we have a work. Not always it is a work, because also other subject matters. So definition of acts that are protected by the Copyright Act but are not works. Basically performer performances and sound recordings. They're not work. Their definition is not the definition of a work. You don't need originality or creativity to create them, but they're still protected. Then we have RMI that establishes which rights you can use. So you can copy and redistribute this work 3 times. And then we have technological protection measures, which basically are enforcing the rights established by RMI. So DRM, the sum of TPM and RMI, is just an extra layer that we use to enforce legal rights. We have the Copyright Act saying the author has this, and this right. But since in the digital environment it's so easy to go beyond this right, to make multiple copies of works, then we have a technological enforcement of these rights. Technology that tells us you cannot copy. If you download songs through iTunes and you download the DRM version, not the free one, you cannot listen these songs in not authorized devices. You cannot make infinite copies of these songs. Because there is a technological layer that implements the legal one. So we have 2 layers.
build C-32, at least for the part that regards digital right management, is a third layer. Because it's telling us that if we break these technological protection measures that are enforcing the rights, we are committing another infringement. So we have a three-layered system. Law, enforced by technology, enforced by law again. The reason why is because we know in a digital world it's very easy to make a lot of copies of songs, movies, so big industries are concerned because they are losing a lot of money, are losing a lot of time, but the reason why they do that is to try to have their right respected, fulfilled. They say you have to copy only one time this movie. You can see it only 2 times. You cannot redistribute it. If you take the end user license agreement of the software running on your computers, or I don't know, if you rent movies, the contract that you sign with the rental office, or all this type of contract that you sign that has as object the usage of digital works, you see that all these rights are contractually enforced. But who cares? I mean, you don't read the agreements. Usually, unless you're doing a lot of money out of that, they don't sue you, they don't come after you. Sometimes they do, but statistically, you know, it doesn't happen that often. To have a technological layer that impedes that is way more effective. To have an extra, a third legal layer that renders illegal the very same act of breaking the technology that impedes you to use your rights, and then we will see if those are your or not your rights. It's another way more efficient way to enforce those rights. In this picture, we see the first 3 concepts that I have described: TPM, RMI, DRM. There is not trusted computing. Why? Probably you cannot read that, but this is a screenshot of the preferences of my PDF reader. Probably, unless you're using Linux, you don't have this option. I'm using free software, so I'm free and I have this option. I don't know if you are able to read this line. Are you? It's white on white, I understand. Basically it says, obey DRM restrictions or limitations. And I can mark or unmark it. Of course, in my program it is unmarked. I have the choice to decide whether I will respect or not DRM. Why? Because I'm not running their software, I'm running my software. In this specific case, I didn't write it, somebody else did, but I'm running a different type of software. The strongest limitation of DRM is that you need to write, to use DRM compliant software in order to have your digital right management system working. If you run a different type of software, usually you can overcome this limitation pretty easily. So the big problem here is to have a hardware system that refuses to run software that is not trusted. And here we have trusted computing. Okay? The idea is that the 3 layers that we have seen, law, technology, law, are enforced one again by a 4th layer, which we could call technological layer or hardware layer. To crack hardware is way more difficult than to crack software. If we take a screwdriver and we open this computer, I mean, I did a couple of times, not with this one, fortunately, but it's extremely complicated. If we open an old desktop, we can understand which part is the hard drive, which one is the RAM, we can kind of operate it. But in this case, it's way harder. Plus, the level of encryption is like is inside the very same CPU, is inside the bus transmission system. It's not possible, or eventually extremely difficult and expensive to, let's say, crack software, hardware, to modify the hardware. So we have now 4 layers of enforcement: law, copyright legislation; technology, technological protection measures enforcing copyright legislation. Again, copyright legislation, at least proposed like being C-32, enforcing once again the technological protection measures. And the 4th, in this case trusted computing, that once again enforce on a hardware basis all the system that we have seen. Now, don't take me wrong, I'm not criticizing trusted system in general. They might be very useful. Imagine, for example, the cases of voting machine. You don't want people running their own software on the machine that you're using to vote. Because they could run a piece of software saying, if this guy is voting for A, give the vote to B. We don't want that, at least not again, right? So, there are meaningful applications of trusted systems. However, in this specific view, which I acknowledge is just one of the many views of the cathedral that we could have, so if you put together DRM, TPM, digital right management, and trusted computing, this is what could happen. Why? There are many explanations to that. This is one, I guess. At this point, you might start thinking that I'm a little bit paranoid. Yes, maybe. I mean, you wouldn't be the first person thinking that. However, it's not only about paranoid. There is a very interesting paper that way less people than what I thought actually knows this paper. Shifting the possible, how digital property rights challenge us to rethink digital publishing. Berkeley Technology Law Journal, 1997. 13 years ago. Means 1 year after the international agreements that set for TPM protection. 1 year before Digital Millennium Copyright Act in the US. We will see that. But the date is key. That guy, Mark Steffi, besides having an academic background, he was principal scientist at Xerox. So we know what they do at Xerox. Well, very interesting stuff, but I mean, it's a very specific company. Now he's at Park, and the definition of Park, I found it very interesting because it's a premier center for commercial innovation. Park, a Xerox company, is in the business of breakthrough. We work closely with global enterprises, entrepreneurs, government agencies, and partners, and other clients to invent, co-develop, bring to market game-changing innovation by combining imagination, investigation, and return on investment for our clients. This is a very evocative wording. Another way that is applicable to the system that we have seen is privatization of justice. Because in a trusted system as the one that we have seen, where we have technological protection measures, right management information, DRM, and trusted computing, working in the 4-layer system that we have seen, we are identifying in the same person or entity or business, or you decide, the creator of the rule, the interpreter of the rule, the enforcer of the rule, and the person who benefits from the rule. I'm using the word rule and not right because at this point, who controls the technology could enforce also behaviors that are not set forth in any act. They just decide that this specific behavior needs to be fulfilled. Maybe they're wrong, however, technologically speaking, it works. Legally speaking, it works because you have to break the TPM in order to perform the action that is maybe legitimate. Problem is that in many corporate acts, like in the Canadian one, at least in the proposed one, if you break a TPM, in order to carry on legitimate activity, because, for example, it's covered by fair dealing, this does not matter. You're still violating a TPM. You're still circumventing a TPM, and you're still liable. And this is very important because we see that we are protecting TPM regardless of copyright infringement. The point is that TPM and copyright infringement, at least how it is being implemented in Canadian law, has nothing to do. They are in the same act. There are different reasons why they are in the same act, but they are not the same thing. In other countries, maybe because they have been implemented differently. In Canada, if Bill C-32 passes, no. Now, this was the most, I guess, complicated part because it's where we were analyzing the interaction between law, technology, and maybe my paranoias. But I think it was pretty interesting, and I acknowledge that it's just one of the many views that we could have on this matter. We eventually can discuss about that. Sometimes in the real world it works, sometimes not. We will see that. However, I think that it's very interesting now to see why Bill C-32 says that. The rhetoric that I tell you is that because we have to fulfill our international obligation. Let's have a look at this international obligation. There are basically two international treaties. WIPO Copyright Treaty, so World Intellectual Property Organization Copyright Treaty, and the other one, the WIPO Performance and Phonograms Treaty. Both are of 1996. Both have been signed in the same place. They are considered twin agreements. They were discussed and agreed together. The only difference, they say almost the same thing. The only difference is that the first one regards works. The second one regards what we call other subject matters, or allied rights or neighboring rights. So basically, former performances, sound recordings, broadcasting signals, etc. We will focus on the first one because it's the relevant one for us, but basically everything we say is applicable to both. So, Article 11 is the article where we have the definition of technological protection measures and where our international obligation originates. Article 11 says, member states are required to provide adequate legal protection and effective legal remedies against the circumvention of effective technological measures that are used by authors in connection with the exercise of their rights. This is everything they say. They don't say anything more. They don't, well, this is Article 12. This is the origin of RMI, the second concept that we have seen. We can skip this one for time reasons and focus on the Article 11. So, let's have another look to the definition of TPM in Bill C-32. Effective technology device or component that, in ordinary course of its operation, control the access and control the copy and other activity. Is prohibited to circumvent access control. It is prohibited to distribute, marketing, manufacture, import, offer for sale or rental, copy control, and access control. Oh, sorry. Still okay. Why it says that? Again, Article 11. Provide adequate legal protection and effective legal remedies against the circumvention. There is no distinction between access control or copy control. There is no distinction, there is no requirement to limit the production, manufacture, importation, commercialization, or whatever, of potentially infringing devices. There is no requirement not to limit these circumventing capabilities to infringing acts. Meaning, we could have implemented easily in a way that says TPM violation is not legal unless, it is illegal only when there is a copyright infringement. No copyright infringement, no TPM violation. It's reasonable. We will see later on that many states, many countries went this way. Canada, no. So we have three key aspects. We have three key aspects that do not originate from international obligations. So where they originate from? Since I am paranoid, the first place where I looked was the United States legislation, and in particular the US Digital Millennium Copyright Act of 1998, many years ago. We are not going through the DMC because it's very long, very complicated, but it's very easily to find except the same or almost the same wording. We looked section 1201, no person shall circumvent technological measure that effectively controls access to a work protected. Section B, no person shall manufacture, import, offer to the public, provide, or otherwise traffic, blah, 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 measures that effectively protects a right of a copyright. We have the distinction between access and copy control devices. We skip the analysis word by word of the MCA. You can control, but basically what we have in the MCA are three key concepts. The MCA defines access control and copy control, prohibits circumvention for copy control, prohibits production, manufacture, and distribution of both access and copy control. And we can end, they consider, but this is a little bit under debate because recent case law is a bit contradictory, so we are not really sure. But in many cases, infringing a TPM, also if there is no infringement of copyright, has been held to be an infringement. So it seems that my question is, implementing the Bill C-32 TPM provisions in the way that we are doing, it's an international obligation or it is a USA requirement? Because implementing access control, copy control distinction, implementing a prohibition or dealing with devices, implementing a prohibition to circumvent TPM also when there is no copyright infringement, these are not international obligations. WCT, the international agreement that we have ratified and now we have to implement, does not ask us to do that. Could be C-32 have said something different? Well, I think you can probably guess my answer. But again, WCT, so the World Copyright Treaty, Article 11, does not require a distinction of copy and access control. Why this is important? Copyright is about a set of rights that usually is listed in Article 1, 2, 3, in the first 5 articles worldwide. Take a Copyright Act, you read it. First article, it says, copyright grants the author the right to, and then there is a list. And usually it's the right to copy, distribute, redistribute, communicate to the public, broadcasting, create derivative works, translate, etc., etc., etc. A lot of rights. Access, no. Access is not copyright. The access right has never ever been present in any copyright act. Nor in history, nor now, not even in the US officially. Copyright is not about access, it's about copy and redistributing. To create a system of technological protection measures and create a specific type of TPM that prevent access and recognizing legal protection to these access control protection measures, also in absence of copyright infringement, means to create a new right, the right to access. And means to create it surreptitiously, because nobody discussed that, nobody understood that. We don't know that. But then, at the end of the day, when we try to access a work that we have legally purchased, we see that we cannot, because we are not using the right software, maybe, or for many other reasons, or because we have accessed it already once. And they're enforcing a rule that says you can only see it once. And we cannot break this technological protection, because if we do that, this now is illegal. It's not illegal because we are violating copyright, because copyright is not about access. It is illegal because we have created a third layer that is legally protecting the technological one, so we have surreptitiously created a new access right. We have done that in the US, we have done that in some European countries, we are trying to do that in Canada. Many countries, they refuse to do that. And they could, because there is no international requirement to go this way. So the distinction of access control and copy control that have been underlined so much is so important for this reason. Without telling it to you, they are creating a new right. Access to words, access to information, access to knowledge. If they don't want, you don't access. Again, WCT does not require limitation to fair dealing use or other exceptional limitation to copyright. WCT doesn't say anything about that. It doesn't say that TPM, circumvention of TPM should be not acceptable also in absence of copyright infringement. They don't say that. They don't require limitation to use, production, manufacture, importation of devices or technologies. So these three key features of Canadian proposed legislation are not present in WCT, are not an international requirement. What others have done? That's interesting because even Canada, a few years ago, understood this problem much better than what it's doing right now. Because Bill C-60, 7 years ago proposal, so we had C-60, C-61, C-32. The first two fall down because there has been elections, and this one apparently goes through. But Bill C-60 in Canada had provisions regarding TPM, but there was a specific exception for fair dealing provisions, and there was no limitation on tool or devices. So under Bill C-60, and I'm not defending Bill C-60 in general, but only for what it concerns TPM, it was clearly stated that if you circumvent a TPM, but you're not violating copyright because it's fair dealing, for example, or because it's a public domain work, there is no circumvention of TPM. There's no penalty, you're not committing an illegal action. It also had no provision regarding the importation, manufacture, or all these activities that we have seen regarding potential violating technologies. Australia, that is very clear. Until 2000, Australia had a legislation similar to Bill C-60. So no legislation, no violation of TPM if there is no violation of copyright. So if there is no copyright infringement, you can't circumvent TPM. Plus there was no limitation to the importation and production of devices. Australia-US Federal Trade Agreement of 2004, very good agreement for Australia for free trade agreements, so it's comparable to NAFTA. One of the requirements on Australia was to modify the section of their Copyright Act regarding TPM, including the fact that use of circumventing devices should not be held legitimate anymore. European Union Copyright Directive, it's not on the US that are bad. Also, Europe is pretty bad. I mean, I'm not. However, you know, in Europe, for the very weird system that they have, when the European Union creates a directive, the directive is not applicable to states. I mean, it's not applicable. The directive is meant for national parliaments, not for national courts. So every national country parliament has to create a piece of legislation that applies in their own country. So a directive in Europe is not applicable unless it has been transformed into national legislation by the Spanish, German, whatever parliament. The European Union Comparative Directive is very similar to the DMCA, however, they leave like an open door. They leave the possibility to state to implement or not specific type of legislation regarding TPM. We can make a list, but we can see easily how Germany, Denmark, France, many states, many countries, they have not implemented the distinction between copy control and access control. They have limited the circumvention of TPM to acts of actual copyright infringement, and they don't have limited the importation, production, and redistribution of infringing devices. Japan, again, no access right and TPM infringement, circumvention is an infringement only if there is an actual copyright infringement. This is just to answer a very, very easy question. What is this act? I will just the question is, could Bill C-32 have said something different? Yes, of course, very easily. There is no international obligation to use these three type of limitations that we have identified: access control, copy control, copyright infringement, and violating devices. No international obligation, as much as many other states have done different. Alternatives. No, we're almost. Oh, no, sorry. It was too fast. So, there are many alternatives. There are legislative ones, so protest against Bill C-32 because it's not good for the part of TPM. Bill C-32 has very good aspects as well. For example, the provision regarding fair dealing, they are pretty good because they are introducing into Canadian fair dealing provisions exception for parody, satire, and education, which are aspects that right now in Canadian corporate law are not present. US fair dealing, yes. Canadian fair, US fair use, yes. Canadian fair dealing, no. So Bill C-32 has good aspects. This is one. However, in the case of TPM, no. It's the worst they could have done. So, legislation is bad. There is other thing that you can do more easily. Yes. For example, to use those type of licenses that are meant for sharing and redistributing knowledge. I identified probably the most, the most famous, or widespread or used, Creative Commons for basically every type of work, and the GPL, so the most important license for free, libre, open source software, so Linux, for the case of software. I'm not going to enter into too many details because we don't have much time, but eventually can discuss that. What I want to give you is just a very general overview and to see how, contractually speaking, they deal with TPM. So, we start with Creative Commons. Basically, Creative Commons is a US association. They created a set of licenses that you can use and that are meant to be a balance So a balance between all right reserved, so the standard situation of copyright. When you create something, copyright law gives you all the rights automatically. You don't have to register, you don't have to do anything. It's not like patent law where you have to file an application and obtain, in order to obtain a patent. Copyright law operates automatically. You create something, you have the copyright on it. The standard situation is that, the default one is that legislation grants to you, to the author, all the rights that you have seen. The right to copy, redistribute, communicate to the public, create derivative works, be named as an author, integrity to your work, etc., etc., etc. This situation is famous as all right reserved. If you take almost every book or CD or whatever, you open the second page, you see copyright 2000 whatever, the name, and all rights reserved. This is to remember you that you're just purchasing a copy and the right to listen to the music or to read the book, not to redistribute it, not to mash it up, not to create copies. On the other side, we have the public domain, where works are not protected anymore because copyright protection has expired, and you can do everything with that. So there is no right reserved. In order to create a balanced system, through the use of these licenses, they try to create a regime that they call some right reserved. So basically, if you use a Creative Commons license, you're reserving to yourself some rights, and you're licensing to the general public other rights. So for example, any license grants to the general public to the right to copy and redistribute, to broadcast or public performance, plus you can decide if you want to add extra rights to the general public. So we will see that briefly, but it is an online form, and by clicking you can decide whether you want to offer to the general public or to reserve for yourself the right to create derivative works. And if yes, if you want to add the limitation saying, yes, but as long as the derivator uses the same license. Or you can reserve for yourself the right to create derivative works. Another option is that to grant to the public or reserve for yourself the right of commercial uses. So you might want to grant to the public, to everybody, the right to use, listen, modify, communicate, etc., etc., but only for non-commercial purposes. So if radio wants to play your song, has to come to you and negotiate a commercial license. It's very important because this modularity, I call it modularity, allows for a huge variety of business methods connected to that. Another characteristic is that Creative Commons licenses are user-friendly, meaning that they are expressed in 3 different formats or languages. A human one, because lawyers are not humans, so they created a human one, meaning a very easily common deed where you can understand what you can do and what you can't without reading 10 pages. The 10 pages that actually represent the legal document, and then the machine-readable code, so that you can use specific search engines or plugins in order to ask to the query that you're doing. For example, imagine that you're using Google, you look for, I don't know, classical music. Well, classical music is a bad example. Pop music. Through the use of this machine-readable code, you could make a more sophisticated research and typing. Pop music, but only if released with Creative Commons commercial share-alike. So you can look for the content, but you can look also for the type of rights that this content is released under. I have a couple of screenshots, so it's much easier. So, very easy to use. You go to creativecommons.org, you click on license, and they ask you basically these 2-3 questions. Will you allow uses, commercial uses of your work? And you click yes or no. You allow modification of your work? Yes. Yes, as long as the others share alike. Basically, they use the same license that you're using. No. You choose the jurisdiction, so Canada, US, whatever, and then eventually you can add other information like your name, the name of the co-authors, the title, etc., etc. What you obtain is the legal code, so the license, the document that, legally speaking, is the important one. 10 pages, you read it, you have all the definition that you want. You obtain the human readable code, the commons deed. Very simple, you take it and you see that you can share remix under the following condition, attribution, and plus a couple of waivers. So you see it, you don't have to read 10 pages, you know what you can and what you cannot do. And the machine code. This is a very easy, short HTML tag, and you can use it to attach it to your work, so that, for example, when you use, this is www.search.creativecommons.org. This is a meta search engine. Basically, it uses the type of searches that you usually use, like Google, Google Image, Yahoo, Flickr, etc., etc., etc. But it adds on top of that like an interface that allows you to look for the type of rights and licenses. Okay? What does Creative Commons say about TPM? 4.8 says, when you distribute or public perform the work, you may not impose any effective technological measure on the work that restrict the ability of a recipient of the work from you, etc., etc., etc. So, the use of Creative Commons license invalidates any technological protection measure that you may want to apply. Actually, if you use Creative Commons, probably you don't want to apply any TPM. If you want to apply TPMs, it's because they're not really interested in using this type of licensing scheme. But what it is important is that if you release something under Creative Commons, no TPM whatsoever. Now I'm going to go even more quickly because I think the time is over. But just to give you the same example, free open source software, it's basically, we could very oversimplifying, we could say that it's the same as Creative Commons for software. Software is a bit peculiar because it's expressed in source and binary form. It's a little bit different as a type of word. So GPL is a much better license for software. Technically speaking, you might apply a Creative Commons to software, but it would be a very bad idea because it's not meant for software. GPL is meant for software. Free open source software is based basically on 4 freedoms. They use to use the program for any scope, to study the program, understand how it works, adapt it to your needs, distribute copies of the program, improve the program, and distribute the modification. And to that, there is one prerequisite, the source code availability. GPL version 3 is the current version of GPL. GPL stands for General Public License, so it's the GNU General Public License. The operating system full name is GNU Linux. GNU is part of this project. They created, together with the Free Software Foundation and the Open Source Initiative, different type of licenses. The GPL is the most famous. 2 years ago, they have updated the GPL from version 2 to version 3 in order to modernize it. And among the different modifications that they apported, there is the provision regarding technological protection measures. What they say is that not covered work shall be deemed part of an effective technological measure under any applicable law-fulfilling obligation under Article 11 of the WIPO. Even more interesting is that when you convey a covered work, you waive any legal power to forbid circumvention of technological protection measures. Making very simple, what they say is that you can use what, technologically speaking, might represent a TPM, a trusted module, but legally you're acknowledging that this is not an effective measure. Why? Because you might want to run Linux on a voting machine. If you look, for those of you who are more interested in computer science aspect, if you have a look at the kernel.org mailing list where they discuss how to develop future kernel modules, there has been a huge debate whether to insert in the Linux kernel trusted system modules. So basically modules that would allow to use the trusted hardware of many devices that are currently sold. At the end of the day, they said, the first position was no, we should forbid it, free software, not TPM. At the end they said, well actually it would be, to say that would mean to forbid a specific technology. And once again, a technology is not good or bad. Humans are good or bad. And the usage that humans can do of this technology might be good or bad. So let's not forbid the technology, because there are legitimate uses of this technology, like for example, trusted system of mission critical application. Again, I usually make the voting machine example because it's the more clear one, right? However, under a legal point of view, you're waiving any right to enforce this TPM violation. You are saying that this TPM is not effective. It works, it doesn't. So far we don't know. I would say, of course, yes. And I guess that this is almost everything. So thank you very much for your attention. Hope that you didn't get bored.
Questions for Dr. Orgay?
So how does that apply, the access control, how does that apply to devices as simple as DVD players and Blu-ray players?
DVD players is a good example because it might represent a case of access control without copy control sometimes. There has been decision in the US saying, okay, access control in the case of DVD, I mean, you violate it to access because of the regional code, right? So you want to see the DVD at your place and you both live in Australia, so the regional code is different and you cannot see it. You cannot access it. You are violating an access control system. But, for absurd, you might be allowed to make a copy. However, how you can make a copy if you cannot access it? You make a scrambled copy, so another copy that you cannot see. This is why I really think that the distinction between, especially right now, maybe 10 years ago might have mattered, the difference. Right now, I think that the difference between copy control and access control, it's a way to enforce a new right. Yeah.
So does it prevent companies from making software such as Nero and other burning software, because those are applications to essentially access and copy formats?
Yeah, however, the point is that the definition of infringing technology. I didn't enter into this part, but there has been another huge debate whether the definition should be a technology primarily meant for TPM violation or exclusively meant for TPM violation. The debate is the same that we had 20 years ago with the Betamax and VHS case, right? So a technology that has substantial non-infringing uses should be forbidden just because some of the uses are actually infringing copyright or not. 20 years ago, the US Supreme Court said no, because there are substantial non-infringing uses. Right now, I still believe that it should be like that. I believe even more. I believe that you should not forbid a technology. You should say that circumventing a TPM is not legitimate, but to say that you cannot deal, import, product, a technology or a device, this to me makes no sense. It's censorship. It's a way to stop innovation. It's a way, to create market distortion. It's not a competitive market. It's a monopolistic market. If you can say no, don't produce this technology. But in that case, in the case of Nero, I mean, I see, that the main objective is to make copies, not to break TPMs. So eventually, those modules of Nero meant to violate TPMs or to the scrambles might be considered in violation of this type of provisions.
And what about any computer DVD drives or Blu-ray drives? Because now there's
But you're purchasing a license, right? That's the reason why on Linux, in theory, we cannot see any DVD, because Linux is not an entity. It's like a social effort. So there's not an entity who has purchased a license to show DVD. The guy, what's his name? He became famous like DVD John. So a 13 years old fellow from Germany who wrote a piece of code that allows to see DVD on Linux. He has been prosecuted by FBI. I mean FBI. Because I want to see a DVD that I have legally both on my computer, and I cannot just because I decided to use a different software. I don't want to buy Windows, I don't want to buy Apple, I'm using Linux, I cannot see a DVD that have both, that I have paid for. Yep.
Kind of a two-part question. You made reference to the fact that, like I purchased ebooks, so I'm going to use this as an example. If you purchase an ebook, you are limited as to what devices you can use it on based off of DRM and so on and so forth. But by nature, that seems inherently repugnant. You bought something, you should be able to use it however you want. But don't we live in a market where you pay a certain amount for the benefits of that item, and if that item itself doesn't provide the benefits you want for it, you just shouldn't pay that value for it. You wouldn't pay the money for an ebook if you wanted to use it wherever. You would just buy the paper version. Same with the DVD. If all you had to use was a Linux operating system to watch your DVD, you simply wouldn't buy the DVD with the purpose of watching it on that Linux system. You couldn't. It didn't provide the sources. So an argument that you should be allowed to, based off of being prevented by software on it, suddenly you're being harmed. You paid for something you couldn't use. That's not your problem, or it's not the manufacturer of the DVD's problem. So don't we live in a market where you just simply shouldn't be paying for something that doesn't fit your needs as such? And secondly, you had made the claim that it to an extent prevents you from using, again, an ebook that has technological protection measures that prevent access to the work specifically. There are the Act does provide the ability of the Governor and Council to make regulations that allow for access when it comes to fair use examples, and it gives the list of fair use. Are we actually limiting those uses when it comes down to it by providing I appreciate it's kind of backwards. It allows you, it puts the onus on the individual to say, well, I'm using it for this purpose, as opposed to specifically writing that purpose into the Act. But at the same time, isn't it still allowing you to do all those fair use things? It's just requires you to be like, I am using this for fair use, so there should be an exemption for that.
It should be, starting with the second one,
Sure.
It should be very clear written in the Act. If you're violating a TPM, but you're for a legitimate use, so there is no copyright infringement, there is no TPM infringement. Because if TPM are meant to protect copyright, if you're not violating copyright, you're not violating a TPM, because it's not on copyright. So public domain works, fair use activities, all the other list of exception limitations that we have. However, at present legislation, what it's clearly stated is that if you violate the TPM in absence of copyright infringement, you're still liable because they're violating a TPM. To me, it makes no sense. Because either the TPM are meant to protect copyright, or they are meant to be something completely different. If they are something completely different, then let's call them with their name. Don't try to sell me this is copyright. This is not copyright. This is another thing. There is a cultural trend in the past 150 years, and especially in the past 30 years, to call everything copyright. Because it's very used to serve the wave of Hollywood lobbies, Bollywood right now lobbies, computer associates, RI, AAA, etc., etc., etc. Many behaviors that should fit more in privacy legislation, in anti-competitive behavior, or I don't know, whatever, they are trying to be argued on the copyright level because well, for many different reasons. A cultural one, everything is copyright, the sacrality of private property. Another one is because copyright law is actually very well internationally harmonized. We have a lot of international agreement that harmonizes IP. We have TRIPS, so we have the UN-based harmonization system, based on the WCT and the World Intellectual Property Organization, but we have also the harmonizing activity carried on by the WTC, the World Trade, the WTO, the World Trade Organization. They're not a UN agency. They work on the basis of different internal rules. They are much more efficient in passing agreements, so like the TRIPS, the trade-related aspect on IP, and they have what the WIPO does not have. They have an enforcement system. They have panels that are able to condemn nations, countries that are not implementing correctly their treaties. In the case of the WIPO, this does not exist. In fact, Canada has ratified but not implemented the WTC for over 15 years, and the only thing that has happened was once a year the WIPO saying, hey, do you remember that you have still to implement that? In the case of WTC, well, there has been 3 or 4 cases, but there has been, I mean, the state that well, it was US, China, Canada, I guess. There have been the panel decided that in this specific situation, one of the 2 countries was not implementing adequately one of the treaty, and they have, condemned it to implement it properly, to pay, like, monetary sanction, etc. So, depends, it really depends. I really believe that many things that we are calling copyright is not copyright. If we take the Statute of Anne, which is the first copyright act ever in 1710, you'll read the long title, and the long title is An Act for the Encouragement of Learning by recognizing to authors the property of the copies of their books. Very similar. But the key concept is that the objective of the Copyright Act was the encouragement of learning. That the way to achieve that, how to do that, was by recognizing to authors the property of their books. So the objective is the encouragement of learning. The way to reach this objective was recognizing property. And at that time, only of copies of books. So no software, no songs, no sound recordings, broadcasting signals, whatever. Books and only copies. So no public performance, no redistribution, no etc., etc., etc. Only copies. And this was only 300 years ago. And the situation until 150, 100 years ago, it was not that different. Originally, the term of protection was 14 plus 14 years from creation. Right now, in Canada, it's 50 years after the death of the author. US and Europe is 70 years after the death of the author. This is for the encouragement of learning? To me, clearly not. This is creating monopoly rights, because corporate patents, etc. Economically speaking, under economic analysis of the law point of view, there are monopoly rights on information. Is proper of a market system? No, it's proper of a monopolistic system. So let's decide, are we in a market system or not? Because if we are, then we have to behave as we were under any point of view, not only under the point of view that is good for industry and when it is good for citizens or people or users, then we are in a different system. And I don't remember the first question.
I was more along the lines of, because we are in a market where people pay what they feel an item is worth.
Economically speaking, what they do is market segmentation. In a perfect competition system, you have an indefinite number of businesses. They produce, and since they are in competition among them, the price that they are selling to you is the lowest possible. So the marginal price is the marginal cost plus 1, okay? Because otherwise they fall out of market. In this way, you have the curve of offer and demand, and you have a big square that is called consumer surplus.
Yeah.
Because consumers are able to internalize the biggest part of the surplus created by this specific market system. This is how we have been told, this is where they tell us we live. Market segmentation is a monopolistic system. You can obtain market segmentation, and market segmentation is a way by companies to internalize a consumer surplus, is a monopolistic behavior. You can obtain that only if this economic system is either monopolistic or oligopolistic one. It's not a free market. All these activities are proper of a market that is not a free market. So if we are in a free market, then no, you don't have the right to charge me for access. Especially because access is not a right recognized to you by any piece of legislation. Or at least it was like that until a few days ago. Well, in the case of Canada, still, because access control DPMs are not passed yet.
Is that any different to selling software with a CD key? You're still selling, you sell the CD key with the right to access. You can sell the software without a CD key whenever you can buy it.
I'm not neglecting that in a digital environment, the harm that could be created to businesses selling information is a real issue, and we have to do something in order to protect their investment. I'm not neglecting that. This is a completely legitimate approach. But between identifying a need and the many different ways to satisfy this need and the one that we are pursuing right now, there is a huge difference. To me, if we had implemented legislation protecting TPMs like, I don't know, Japan, for example, so no distinction between access and copy, exemption in case of non-infringement of copyright, and eventually, but we can negotiate importation and production of devices, to me this would have been a very balanced solution. We are enforcing those activities that are not legitimate because you are not supposed to make, I don't know, 400 copies or to create derivative works because you just bought, the right to listen it at your place. But if your iPod crashes, it's out of warranty, and you want to crack these songs to listen on your, I don't know, another name of a MP3, whatever player, then it's fair use, then your activity should be legitimate. This to me sounds like a balanced solution.
I was going to just say, I think they're probably going to work on that aspect, but an example would have been people with perceptual disabilities, anyone visually impaired or with dyslexia or anything like that, in order to make a braille copy of electron, and so much content is born digital now. It's born digital, it has the TPMs or DRM, I mean, all these rights on it. In order to make a braille copy or a sound recording of this material is illegal.
Well, this is, I didn't enter in the provision regarding exception to TPM. So what I was most concerned is the biggest exception, fair dealing.
Yeah.
There is a list of activities that, in which case violating a TPM is not considered illegal. This case is listed. So perceptual disabilities in Bill C-32, yeah. I don't have it with me, but I can find it easily. Jailbreaking phones. If you're breaking a phone just to use a different operator, you're breaking a TPM, but this is allowed under BC32. Reverse engineering for interoperability. So if you're developing your own software and you want to create an API for interoperability with a TPM protected software, then you are allowed to break it only for working on interoperability. And another few.
National security.
Yeah, national security,
information,
criminal prosecution, etc., etc. The point is that, you know what they did in Brazil? In Brazil, they did. It is the responsibility of the content provider, so who is giving you the copy, to take care that in the case where there is a corporate, fair dealing, fair use activity, because the problem is that in this case, for example, you can break the TPM, but it's still not easy. You have to crack it. I mean, if you are not a computer scientist, or if you don't have a friend, or if the TPM is like a strong one, it's not easy to do that.
It was because I remember what the situation was. It was because you couldn't actually get the software that would let
Exactly.
you do it. That was where the case came in. They let you do it, but then they didn't let you have the software
Perfect.
in order to do it. Yeah.
That's perfect, exactly.
Yeah, that was it.
Well, in Brazil they said, if you have a right to access it because it's an exception or fair dealing or fair use, then it's the obligation of the person who applied the TPM to put you in the condition to access the work. Otherwise, you can sue him. Brazil is a civilized country.
I think we have time for one more question.
Yep.
So does this make proprietary formats, like if, for example, WMV for Windows movies or MP4s for Apple? So if I was on a Windows system or anything other than Apple, just to watch a movie in MP4 format, is that breaking access rights, or is it just for encryption standards? So VHS or
Now this is a very clear anti-competitive behavior, but that's obvious. Another way, I mean, we can understand that the usage of this type of technologies is not a market system, is a different system. Is because in this case, you don't have free competition because you're obliging. I mean, the business method is based on that. You sell iPhones for, okay, it depends on the storage capability. But if you buy songs for 99 cents on iTunes, and your iPhone can store how many? 100,000? Okay, 100,000 songs. 99 cents, let's say $1 a song, 100 songs. How many people do you know who have spent $100,000 in songs on their iPhone or iPod? How many people do you know that have an iPod full of songs? The business method is different, okay? It's called lock-in. You buy something because it's very cheap and it's very attractive, and you know, day after day, you create like an investment, you create a critical mass, and then you discover that in order to use this data, you have to use a proprietary technology. So you are obliged to buy this proprietary technology, even though if you don't like it. If I have 100,000 DVDs, well, I probably have to buy a DVD reader or a Windows system or an Apple system or whatever else system, but I cannot use a Linux system, save for the DVD job, right? This is a lock-in for. This is dangerous, this is treacherous for users. Because they are obliging you to behaviors that you don't want to, right? In a perfect competition environment, you could choose the provider of content and you could choose the provider of another service. Who offers you the best deal, you go for it. This is free competition, right?
Well, I hate to close off the discussion at this point, but we're just about out of time. On behalf of the group, I want to thank you very much for your remarks. This is an extremely timely topic. As you may know, Parliament is debating Bill C-32 this very week, and it's that second reading. You've had a terrific way of explaining some complicated concepts for us, and we appreciate it very much. So please join me in thanking